Hello, I'm Anawultus, and today I want to share with you my relatively, or probably relatively, unpopular opinion about the Hong Kong protests. Now, let me just state out from the front, just full disclosure here, I am generally against protests, at least against street protests when it concerns that. That's something I'm generally against. I don't think it's part of a healthy procedure. I'm not interested in popular pressure for decision making so much as I am in making decisions based on reformative actions rather than direct actions, if you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, what I am talking about here is, of course, the Hong Kong protests. Now, I saw that there was a list of demands that had been given, and these are shown on Wikipedia, but I decided not to use Wikipedia directly as my source for this, but instead use the article quoted by Wikipedia, or at least cited by Wikipedia, an article that you can find at focustaiwan.tw. I'll probably put a link in the description that explains some of the arguments that are being made here. And let me just take my anti rebellion, my anti protest mindset, remove that for a moment, and ask myself if I were indeed okay with holding protests, would these protests be okay with the reasoning that is being given for them? So here are the demands, okay? And I'm quoting from this article. They urged the international community to pressure the Hong Kong government into responding to protesters' five demands. Demand number one, withdrawing the bill, and that is the extradition bill, which has raised concerns that it could threaten the human rights of Hong Kong residents, as it would allow the Hong Kong authorities to extradite criminal subjects not just to Taiwan and Macau, but also China. And this is following an event where a couple from Hong Kong went to Taiwan, and one of them murdered the other. And there wasn't a stable process by which extradition could occur. So they want to prevent that in the future by putting a bill through that would amend their laws regarding extradition so that they would be able to extradite from certain countries that they weren't able to extradite from or to previously. So essentially, they want to, what the government wants to do is they want to open up the possibility for this. Now, as I understand the law, it would allow for a case by case basis, which means that they wouldn't it wouldn't require them to extradite someone if the government doesn't want to extradite someone. So the next demand here is the resignation of Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam. I don't know how to pronounce Chinese names, so I apologize for that in advance. Third demand, no prosecutions of protesters. Fourth demand, stop labeling the protests riots. And the fifth demand would be holding police officers who fired rubber bullets at protesters accountable. I want to hold this article accountable for not placing an Oxford comma in order for me to clearly understand the separation between the items in the list. But anyway, let me go over. First demand, I think that's an unreasonable demand. Withdrawing the bill, I think the bill is something that is necessary for the function of the government, at least when it concerns holding its own citizens accountable and holding the citizens of other countries accountable who are in Hong Kong. Having an extradition agreement with mainland China uh, is, in my opinion, okay, because otherwise what happens is people can commit crimes in mainland China and then just escape to Hong Kong and they can't be extradited. And that's, I think, a form of injustice because someone could murder someone and get away with it. which is a problem. Now, of course, in mainland China, murder is illegal, so it's not as if it's that different. Now, I understand that, of course, the uh, legal system in China is by many considered to be either very corrupt or very unjust in a higher sense. So I understand that individuals generally would not want to send people to China who have committed certain crimes, especially if the crimes that they are accused of committing are crimes that are not crimes in Hong Kong. However, I will say that the if my understanding of the bill is correct, it is a case by case basis. So if they don't want to extradite anyone to mainland China, they don't have to. So, in my opinion, there's no problem there, or at least nothing severe enough that, in my opinion, would warrant an outright civil disobedience campaign or a major protest, because this is just something that, in my opinion, is a very common sense thing to do in the function of a government. Next one, the resignation of Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam. Um, so I don't know exactly uh, why they want the resignation, but it could be possibly due to uh, her involvement with the protest. Now, as I understand, there's also a question relating to how the elections are done, because uh, Carrie Lam is not elected by the people directly, but is instead elected by a council that or a committee that has a large number of members, some of whom are members that are elected by the people, some of whom are members who are elected by industry sectors and businesses and corporate interests. So there's also talk regarding electoral reform in Hong Kong. But I will say that, in my opinion, this is not something that should warrant a protest, but should rather be something that should be handled by the established system, because it indeed can be handled by the established system. This isn't a shortcoming in the government in itself. And in fact, some people would actually prefer the system as it is currently to be that way. Now, I personally don't live under that system, so I can't make a full judgment of that system. But I will say that, in my opinion, if I were in Hong Kong, I wouldn't be protesting for this. Third one, prosecution of protesters. Here's what I'm going to say. Uh, if you break the law, you should be prosecuted. Period. Because if a country does not prosecute its criminals, then you don't have a country anymore at that point. I think it's very important that individuals who have broken the law by resisting arrest, perhaps assaulting policemen, or uh, illegally occupying areas, should indeed be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, because otherwise you end up in a situation where, if you can just get a mob big enough, you can push through uh, anything you want, and nobody gets in trouble. And I don't think that's a way to run a country. So again, I think that the protesters, or at least the ones that are involved in illegal actions, should indeed be prosecuted. Fourth, labeling the protests as riots. Well, if you're illegally occupying an area and the police ask you to leave and you're not going to leave, and then when the police try to forcibly remove you, you fight back, I think that qualifies as a riot. Next one, holding police officers who fired rubber bullets at protesters accountable. Now, I will say that, again, if the police tells you to move, and you're resisting the authority of the police and you're not going to move, I think that the police are justified in applying force. Now, of course, you could argue that there are questions regarding how far you should escalate and how fast you should escalate. Now, I wasn't there, so I don't know whether they immediately started firing or whether they tried other means first to get the people out. But in my opinion, in the enforcement of any law, there's always the implicit assumption that in order for the law to be enforced, you will, in escalation, have to ultimately be willing to escalate to lethal force. So, in other words, escalation to non lethal rubber bullets, in my view, is something that is justifiable. Because if you are unable to uh, to escalate to lethal force, you don't have a state. Because what happens then is that people will just simply get in your way and they'll try to push your buttons. And if you won't respond in kind, then they're simply going to walk over you. And if you're trying to run a country that way, that's not a good thing to happen. So, again, uh, on these 5 points, I don't find any particular thing that is that the government is doing in Hong Kong that is objectionable, as far as I know, and therefore I also find no things among these that I would say justify the extent of civil disobedience in Hong Kong. Therefore, I have to say that, in my view, from the knowledge that I have and from what I have seen, that the Hong Kong protests are, in my view, unethical and unjustifiable, and the police response to the protests, insofar as they are responses to disobedience and disrespect to the proper authorities, are entirely justifiable and ethical, insofar as they are those and do not overstep, of course, other ethical considerations such as excessive use of force and things like that. But ultimately, I say that if it came to the point where the police had to shoot the protesters, I would have to say that the police would be justified in doing so, so long as there was an escalation that led to that point. But anyway, that's my opinion on that. I understand that my opinion is going to be a very controversial opinion. I'm not a tanky, okay? I'm not an authoritarian. Let me be very clear on that. I think that the people should have a voice in government, but that voice should be in an organized manner, in a manner that does not subvert the authority of the state, in a manner that does not lead to the destruction of institutions and to the subversion of the very authority by which justice is established in a society. And that's my opinion. I understand that that opinion might be a bit unpopular, but let me just be very clear. I harbor no hate for the Hong Kong protesters, okay? All I am saying is that I am disagreeing with their actions, and I consider their actions to be unethical from my ethical framework. But I harbor no hate for the Hong Kong protesters. I hope that there is a peaceful resolution to this conflict. I hope that in Hong Kong, that the people and the government of Hong Kong can build a society in which they can live in peace and also in happiness, ideally. That's my hope. And I hope that the authoritarianism of China does not creep into Hong Kong and defraud the people of their freedoms. That's also something that I hope. So let me just leave you with that. But anyway, tell me what you think in the comments section below. And I'll be seeing you all next time on Awiltus over and out.